The job of a student is to understand and remember things. So what can research on memory tell us that would enable students to study more quickly and more efficiently? Well, I'm going to talk about a number of phenomena from memory research that are directly relevant to saving students time. Now, the first one. You've heard of cramming. People love to cram, right? It's like, okay, I've got 4 hours on Saturday. I'm going to sit down for 4 hours and do nothing but study biochemistry. That sounds great. It sounds very dedicated, but it's dumb because it turns out that's not how your memory system is designed to work. Your memory system works much better if you study for little chunks of time. So imagine studying for 30 minutes and taking 5-10 minute break, and then another 30 minutes, and then a 5 or 10 minute break, and another 30 minutes and a 5 or 10 minute break. It's even better if you change what you're studying, the classes that you're studying, between those sessions. So instead of spending 8 hours studying organic chemistry and then 8 hours studying, mammalian physiology, go back and forth, switch things up. Why? Why is mass studying or mass cramming so bad? Well, there's a phenomenon in memory called the serial position effect. I remember this curve as having the shape of a cereal bowl. Right? Now, it's a different kind of cereal in a cereal bowl, and this kind of cereal, which means one thing after another, but sounds the same. Serial position effect is this. If I give you a list of, say, 12 words to remember, your memory will be best for the words at the beginning of the list and at the end of the list, and not good at all for the words in the middle of the list. So the position of a word on a list plays a really big role in whether you will remember that word or not. The fact that you remember things at the beginning of the list better, that's called the primacy effect, primacy first. And the fact that you remember things at the end of the list better than the middle is referred to as a recency effect, because those are the words that you heard most recently. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if you study for 4 hours, you've got this one cereal bowl and it's got a really big bottom. You got one primacy effect and one recency effect. And then a big long time of inefficient studying. So don't do it. Break things up. Study for half an hour, take 5-10 minute break, eat an apple, walk around a building, do the dishes, anything to break it up. Because when you do that, then each of those little 30-minute study sessions is going to have its own cereal bowl. So you'll have super memory for the beginning and end of each of those segments of time. So if you take 4 hours and break it up into 7 study sessions, you have a whole lot more primacy and recency effect than you do if you just study all at once the same thing for 4 hours. What this also means for students is that if you're sitting down and reading a textbook or following a lecture, that you'll remember more from the beginning of the lecture and the beginning of the chapter you're reading than from the middle. And you'll remember more from the end of the lecture and the end of the chapter that you're reading than from the middle of the book or chapter. So you need to study accordingly, right? The stuff in the middle gets lost due to something called interference. Politicians know all about the serial position effect, and that is why political ads are timed the way they're timed. Some ads come out really, really early before some people try to get their political ads out before anybody else gets their political ads out. Why? To take advantage of the primacy effect. Then in the days before an election, you hate to look at your social media or turn on the TV or the radio because it's just nothing but political ads trying to take advantage of the recency effect. Okay, there's also something that students need to know about called state-dependent memory. It turns out that when you remember something, you also remember the setting or the context in which you remembered it. in which you studied that material, in which you experienced it. So your memory for something is best when you are in the same physical and emotional and psychological state as when you learned it or studied it originally. In fact, I got a picture down there in the bottom there. I'm not sure if it's a law school or a medical school, but a lot of times in law school and medical school, students will go and study in exactly the same seat in the same lecture hall at which they intend to take the exam, right? So let me first, before I get on the applications, let me give you the supporting evidence. And this was a funny study that was funded by the Navy, actually, because the Navy had to figure out, if you're trying to train Navy SEALs to perform some activity underwater, should you teach them that activity underwater or on ground? Okay. They did that study too, but I think the drunk and sober study is funnier. Okay, so here's a study. There's 4 conditions, okay? There's a learning condition and a test condition. So at learning, when you're learning a list of words, either you're sober or you're drunk. You've consumed a lot of alcohol, enough to make you legally drunk, okay? So half the subjects at study time are sober, the other half are drunk. Then when it comes time to take the test on the material you've studied, again, half are sober and half are drunk, but it's switched, right? So in the end, a quarter of the students are sober during study and sober at test. A quarter of the students are drunk at study and drunk during the test. And then there's 2 groups. Half the subjects have a mismatch there. And then the question is, who recalls the most? Well, not surprisingly, people who are sober when they study and sober when they take the test remember the most words. But look at the people who were drunk when they studied and also drunk when they took the test. They don't remember as much, but compare the next to bottom line with the bottom line. If you're drunk when you're studying something, your memory for that thing is twice as good if you take the test drunk than if you sober up for the test, right? By the way, the Navy figured out that if they wanted to train SEALs, Navy SEALs, to do something underwater, then the best thing to do was to teach them that thing underwater. So why do I tell students this? Well, ideally, you want to take your exams in the same place where you studied the material or heard the material. So if you sit in a particular seat in a lecture hall, try to get that seat again when you take the exam. When the professor asks half the class to take an exam in another room so that everybody can spread out, stay in the same room. There's an advantage. It also means that if you normally grab a cup of coffee before listening to a lecture, then you want to grab that same cup of coffee before you take the exam for that class. And then finally, okay, again, this is California where marijuana is legal, but I have seen a few times in physical person-to-person classes where students came to class and they were not stoned, and then to deal with the anxiety of taking an exam, they clearly had smoked some pot before class because you could smell it a mile away. Now, if you are stoned when you come to lecture, then you want to be stoned when you come to the exam. But if you're not stoned during lecture, do not come to the exam stoned. Don't tell your parents I said that. But that's what the science is. Okay, so we talked about physical and physiological similarity. The same thing works with emotion. If you are depressed, you will be more likely to remember things that occurred when you were depressed before. So if you ever spend time around somebody who is feeling really bad, feeling depressed, you can see they can get in this downward spiral because you're already depressed, but that depression helps you to remember more depressing things, which depresses you more, etc., etc., etc. You may also have friends who seem to always be happy and optimistic. When they're happy, what do they remember more of? Memories of events that took place when they were happy. In terms of physical similarity, this is not helpful for exams, but I think it's helpful for life. There's something called a doorway effect. Happens to me all the time. I'm in my office and I think, oh, I need to remember to write something on the grocery shopping list. So I leave my office, I walk towards the kitchen, I get about halfway there, maybe something distracts me. I'm standing in the kitchen. Why am I here? I don't remember why I came here. Oh. Well, I give up. I go back to my office. I get back to my office. What happens? Now I remember what I needed to do and I can go back and do it. That's a doorway effect because my memory is best in the place where I had the original thought, back in my office. Okay, the last one. And this is a ridiculously powerful effect. It works really well for people who study people, maybe not so well for people who study fish and rocks, but here it is. Your memory system is selfish. It's a big narcissistic system. So it remembers best information that relates to you. Yeah, it's called the self-referential effect. You remember things that you've done and thoughts you've had and experiences and all of that. Anything that relates to you, your memory for that information is much better than your memories for what happened to other people. Okay, so how is that relevant to students? Take the material that you're working with and find a way to relate it to you. It can even be a hokey thing, or you have to use mental imagery or something crazy, but relate the material to you and you'll be much more likely to remember it. So if you're studying, say, for our upcoming exam and you need to remember classical conditioning or operant conditioning terms, think of examples from your own life to understand those terms, and you'll be much more likely to remember the information. Okay, that's it on our first memory lecture. Students, back to Canvas. Everybody else, thanks for watching.